Well, I found myself waking up this morning to a message that had been sent 2 hours earlier, stating from a friend, stating that there had been a mass stabbing on a train to London, and stating directly the ethnicity of the person responsible. So that was sent to me at 7:15 UK time, 9:15 Finnish time. So naturally, I go to the newspapers. I check the Daily Telegraph website and I check the Daily Mail website. And do you know what? The ethnicity of the attacker or the attackers is not stated at all. And indeed, there is a live update system where you have the defense minister or something like that stating that it is unhelpful at this stage to speculate on the ethnicity of the person or persons who engaged in the attack. But yet I've been told via a message the ethnicity of the person that's engaged in the attack. How does he know this? Well, it seems that he knew this because 10 hours earlier, 10 hours ago, so whatever it would have been, 8 hours earlier, one of the people who was on the train, a chap by the name of Ollie Foster, one of the witnesses to this attack, had tweeted out, "I was on the Huntingdon train. I only know of one attacker. He got on the train from Peterborough. He was black, mid-20s. We ran from the back of the train to the end as everyone was screaming to run, explaining there was somebody stabbing everyone and everything." And then he goes into a series of tweets with regard to what happened. Now, that was very extraordinary because that person was literally interviewed in the Mail Online. I remembered the name. The name stuck with me. He was interviewed in the Mail Online as an eyewitness. And he would have told the interviewer for the Mail Online the ethnicity of the attacker, and that information was not reported by the Mail Online. And only now, at 20 minutes past 11, has the Mail Online updated with a new headline stating that it was two attackers who were British citizens of Caribbean descent. Now, at the very least, therefore, the newspapers, I don't remember whether Ollie Foster was interviewed by the Telegraph, but he certainly was interviewed by the Mail Online. At the very least, therefore, these people are covering up information and are guilty of covering up information. They knew this information. This person had obviously imparted to them this information, and yet they chose not to report it, presumably under some sort of government pressure or due to some kind of agreement or with the government that in circumstances like this. And so damage control, impact control, whatever. But what it only showed me today this morning in a very stark way, I don't live in Britain, but is that Britain is not a free country. In a free country, you should be able to reliably get your news from the newspapers. That should be the first port of call. You get your news from the newspapers. They tell you what they know. They interview people and they report the information. And in an unfree country, the newspapers are controlled, the newspapers are censored, the newspapers bend to government pressure, and the newspapers cooperate with the government in order to break bad news, if they must break bad news at all, in a manipulative kind of way, such that they can control the narrative. And this is obviously what has happened this morning, that in order to control the narrative, I can only talk of the Mail Online. I haven't really read the other ones in depth. The Mail Online has deliberately omitted information which it knew, which it had been told by an eyewitness, and it deliberately omitted this information and included information from a government source asking people not to speculate on ethnicity, not to speculate on religion, whatever, and kind of made out that there was this bizarre, unreasonable speculation occurring online, essentially kind of gaslighting people, when the reality was that one of the eyewitnesses, who also had a Twitter account of about 3,000 followers, had gone online and reported what he had told the Mail. And the Mail, however, had chosen to censor what he said, such that the information about the background, which was obvious to everybody, even if he hadn't said it, could be gently leaked out, and the government could feel that they were in control and were controlling the situation. I think that is absolutely amazing that this has just happened. The newspapers have just, the largest news website in the world has effectively engaged in a mini cover-up, has deliberately not reported information that it knew. We all knew anyway, says Peter Christian 541. Yes, but it knew that because it interviewed this guy Ollie Foster as a witness, and he described what happened, and he would have stated, surely, what the person looked like, and this information was deliberately omitted from the report, such that he had to go and tweet it out privately, such that people could discover the truth, and therefore anybody who is not very elderly, anybody that basically relies on Twitter for their news rather than the newspapers, found it out anyway, and therefore knew that the newspaper was censoring its own information, that the newspaper was basically lying, that the newspaper was covering things up, and so just undermined trust even further in the organs of the state and in the institutions of the state. That's what this has done. And they have presented the information only later, once they were in control of the situation, or once the government felt in control of the situation. So the government, in putting out information, was significantly behind a portion of the population that relies on Twitter for their information. Now, I suppose you could argue, maybe, I don't know, but if this were the 1980s, when there was a feeling that this was a freer country, then maybe had information control been so weak on the part of the government, i.e. had there been the internet, had there been effectively the inability of the government to control the narrative and to control information and to control what people know, that there is now, would they have acted in such a way then, with regard to things that happened then, IRA attacks, the Falkland Islands? It's unimaginable if you think about how it was then, which was that you had the radio, you had the television, and you basically just had Chinese whispers. You had information, even jokes would pass around via oral tradition. The only way you attained information was television, the radio, and the newspapers. the newspapers would come out in the morning, and there'd be a few editions throughout the day. And obviously, even television wasn't 24 hours a day. Then there'd be a period of time when television would shut down, and all there was the radio. And even then, quite a lot of the radio stations would shut down. So there wasn't a 24-hour news cycle at all. So would they have been more controlling then? Possibly yes, possibly no. I mean, they might have been equally controlling, but they wouldn't have controlled that kind of information. Something like the ethnicity of the attacker would have been immediately reported, and it wouldn't have been considered in any way rude or unreasonable or dangerous to state the ethnicity of the attacker, so because attitudes were different. But if they had the same attitudes as today, back then, would they have done something manipulative like that? It's very hard to say. I suspect possibly, but this is the problem with the rather more open society that the internet has created. This is the problem, that you can't put the genie back in the bottle, to use the cliche, of the internet now that it is there. We are in a society in which information is much more freely available. And if you try to engage in a cover-up like this, then people that can be bothered to do so, that are of an inquisitive mind, will look into it and will find out what is going on. And therefore, public trust in the government will be undermined in a way that this didn't used to be. Hello, by the way, everybody. It's an impromptu live stream that has been precipitated by waking up to this complete shocker, and even more so by waking up and realizing that the newspapers were not reporting what an acquaintance of mine just sent to me. And being quite shocked by that. So hello, if you're new, could you please do me a favor? Could you please subscribe? Could you subscribe on YouTube? It really helps me if you do that. Could you leave a like? Could you leave a comment? Could you spread the video around? And could you subscribe to my Substack? That's jollyheretic.com, where I put all the most based stuff, some of it free, some of it for you lovely boys that are willing to support me. In-person interviews, vlogs, films I make, a weekly column, and where if you like what I do, you could support me for the cost of just a pint of beer a month. In fact, less than that now because beer is so expensive. But I'd be most grateful if you could do that. But anyway, sorry, someone's saying in the comments, I've said my piece, so I'm now going to engage with the comments. Someone's saying something. Where is it? In the comments about the defense secretary. I can't see. It won't let me go. It won't go back up. It's too quick. But yes, hello everybody. So I just thought, hello everybody. Good afternoon or good morning where you are. Good morning. It's afternoon here. It's in Finland. It's 1:30. HRVOJ Duke 6451 has made the interesting point that these attacks just keep happening. Yeah, this is it. There is a numbness to this. There is a feeling that, oh well, this has just happened again. Another stabbing by the as it were, the usual suspects again. There's almost a weariness to this, and again, all right, we haven't had one for a while. We haven't had an outrage for a while, so it's about time there is an outrage, and we will always be, or those of you in Britain anyway, will always be on edge, awaiting the next possible outrage. And you suspect that these kinds of outrages are more likely to happen around London and around other sort of towns that are vibrant. But in reality, of course, they can happen now because of how things have changed. They can happen absolutely anywhere. I suppose this could have occurred at any point on the line between Doncaster and London, but it occurred in Huntingdon, one of the most stereotypically English places you can imagine. The constituency of John Major. There's this very, very, very English, pretty little place where there's hardly any crime. Of course, it could have occurred anywhere on the line, but Cambridgeshire, essentially. And we know what that area is like, and it happens there, and it happens on a train. So it means that nobody is safe anywhere ever. What are we going to do now? Are we going to make, as is the case in China, I believe, are we going to make railway stations like airports where you have to be checked, where you can't bring certain items on a train? Where there is a security check for knives before you get onto a train? Is that what's going to happen? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have much in the way of security checks at airports. In Finland, until I think the mid-90s or something, or it might even have been 2001, certainly for internal flights, there were no security checks. Why would there need to be? People weren't going to do anything bad. People weren't going to commit crime. People weren't going to blow up the plane. People weren't going to attack people. That's just not how they behaved. So you didn't need security checks. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if in Finland, even now, security checks are a waste of time. Because no one's going to, because it's a relatively united society and no one's going to do anything crazy. Now, obviously, Britain, this is not the case. So do we need security checks on trains? Like, how unfree must people become before they consider how to become free again? The weariness of this, it's basically, this is presumably how, I'm sure this is how people must have felt in Northern Ireland in the Troubles. Indeed, in the 80s, although it didn't affect you in England that much, really, there'd be an IRA bombing every so often. A lot of you are too young to remember, but there would be an IRA bombing every so often. And you just, oh, another one. To be fair, these tended to be targeted. They'd be targeted. So they wouldn't, in general, they wouldn't just kill random people. There were cases where that did happen. So, for example, in Enniskillen, there was a bombing of a Remembrance Day service, and just sort of random members of the public were killed. But in general, these would be targeted at certain places. Actually, to be fair, places that did kill random people. I mean, things like railway stations. That's why they had to take bins away from the underground because of IRA bombs. So they would be targeted, and they'd be every so often, and you wearily got used to it. But they mainly only affected people in Northern Ireland. It was limited to Northern Ireland, and this must be how people in Britain feel this morning. How people in Northern Ireland, in a sectarian society with a low-level civil war that was Northern Ireland, felt. This must be how this is another one. And there's nothing you can do. But I think it gets to a point where it's so bad that somebody has to do something. Somebody has to take the bull by the horns and deal with it, and not listen to the manipulators as well, to the lying manipulators who will say on Twitter this morning, oh, just lying nonsense about how, oh, it's it's humans that have done this or whatever. Just nonsense. It's not the fault. If a government can't protect, the purpose of government is not things like the National Health Service or free schooling or anything like that. The purpose of government, the ultimate purpose of government, is to protect the people. Government is a protection racket, a forced protection racket, like a lot of unpleasant protection rackets. You pay up to have your pub looked after, or they'll burn your pub down. It's a protection racket. And the idea is that it protects you. If the government can't protect you, if it can't protect you from invasion, if it can't protect you from crime, if these are the absolute basic minimum functions of government, that you ensure that there is no crime and you ensure that there is no foreign invasion. That's the point of government. Historically, everywhere, that's the point of government. And if government collapses, then protection rackets will come in, and they will do that, and they will follow that purpose. So you have, for example, in parts of South Africa where law and order has completely collapsed, a guy by the name of, I think it's Bartman, who used to be a South Africa international rugby player, and is now in charge of the largest private security concern in South Africa, and whole areas of the country are under his control. And you simply mark your house clearly as being a house that has his security, and people know to stay away. If they don't stay away, well, you're paying him, you're paying his company, and so they will send people pronto over to deal with the situation, and to protect you, and they will basically just do whatever they take into custody, whatever they do exactly with the criminals. So that he is the de facto president of significant parts of South Africa. And because the police don't do anything, the police are too corrupt and useless and have no money, and they don't do anything. So this man has effectively taken over and is in charge of significant parts of South Africa. And that's where I suppose it will have to go. And people, even if it is illegal to bear arms in the UK, people will just do so. They'll have to do so. That maybe there'll be an industry of coming up with forms of protection that get around the law, because we can't. I mean, this is now basically the Wild West. If people are going to behave like this unpredictably, if at any point, you can't go about your business, you can't get a train from Doncaster to London without the possibility of somebody attacking everybody with a knife. If that's the situation, you can't walk the streets without the possibility of somebody attacking you. It gets to the situation not only where people will need to protect themselves and feel they'll have to protect themselves, but it also will get to a point where people lose trust in the kinds of functions that keep a civilization going. People stop moving about. People stop being jet setters. Life becomes smaller, like in COVID, but not directly forced. And once that happens, people stop spending money, and they stop spending money on holidays, and they stop spending money on anything that could be a risk. And if they stop spending money, then what you get? You get mass unemployment, as all of the people whose job is less directly related to something basic like producing food. All of those people stop having jobs because people hoard money, maybe even turning it into gold, and don't spend it on anything. And then an entire economy that is based around the need to constantly spend money, such that there's all these people doing all these different complex jobs, collapses, and then there just isn't enough work for people, and there perhaps isn't enough food. So that's where this leads to. If you can't rely on things, if you can't rely on the road network, civilization collapses, things get smaller. If you can't rely on the structures of a complex society, then that complex society unravels. And that's what happens in times of war. In times of war, when you're completely up against it and trying to survive, you notice in history that literacy rates go down. And that's one of the first things to go. It's not considered particularly important in the Civil War in England to teach people to read. There's more important things to do. There's plain survival. So literacy goes down, and this is the kind of thing that this could set off if this keeps happening. If this keeps happening, and people feel that they can't safely travel around the country, eventually they stop using the trains. They stop using the aeroplanes. They stop walking the streets. They stop going to shops, like passing by, and the shops close. And then you just get the beginnings of ghost towns, of which I've seen many. If you go to Gosport in Hampshire, where I was a while ago, a lot of the shops, I would estimate a third of the shops in Gosport have shut down. Now, there's all kinds of reasons for this. I mean, the rise of the internet and people working from home and all kinds of stuff. But eventually, you get ghost towns. So yeah, John Smith is saying he gets everything delivered exactly, and so then you just get the collapse of towns. You get, if you walk around Swindon. I was on the Lotus Eaters last week, or was it the week before? And when you go on the Lotus Eaters, you tend to, it's right by the railway station, and so what you do is you just walk from the railway station over to the office where the Lotus Eaters is, and then walk back to the railway station and go home. It's rare that you would explore Swindon, but if you do, then you find, there was a video I did on this called Year Zero. There's a whole shopping centre in central Swindon with almost no functioning shops. It's like something from a bad horror movie, and there's so many shops that are just closed down. And then, because it looks bad to have just windows with hollowed out shops, with nothing in them, the burghers of Swindon have kind of papered over the windows, like the X Marks and Spencers, with slogans about Swindon and things like that, to try to cover up the fact that this is just an empty shell, which was once a shop. And this is everywhere in Swindon. It's everywhere in Gosport. It's everywhere in a place called Waterlooville in Hampshire. There's so many examples of this, of the retreat from the cities for various reasons. But the terrorism issue is different. The terrorism will cause people to be more cautious, to be less likely to spend money, to be less likely to travel unless they can guarantee that it's safe, and to just go in on themselves. And this will be very, very damaging. Gloucester was quite empty last time I went there. James Tough 1403. I've never been to Gloucester. I've always assumed it was one of those pretty medieval towns like Lincoln, which I have been to, and which is a thriving, beautiful little place. Really, it's got its scummy aspects. These very, very long high street. Very, very long high street, and eventually you cross the railway line, which runs right through the middle of the high street, and then it gets Yucksville. And also, if you go up the hill on the other side of the cathedral, then there's these kind of small red brick Victorian houses. But no, I've not been to Gloucester. So in summing up, then, again, if you're new, could you do me a favor? Could you please subscribe here on YouTube, hit the like button, leave a comment, ring a bell, whatever, and subscribe to my subsite. That's jollyheretic.com, whereas in-person interviews, vlogs, videos I do, films I make, and if you like what I do, it's what the cost of a pint of beer a month. Someone's saying that Union Street in Aberdeen has fallen apart. Well, that's since I used to go to Union Street in Aberdeen probably most days for a period of about 2 years. So, and when I went to Union Street in Aberdeen, it was a thriving street, a very, very, very long high street, and it was thriving, and there was all kinds of different shops, bookshops and coffee shops and restaurants and all manner of stuff. And Aberdeen was a wealthy city, and I think it was one of the most expensive cities to live in Scotland, or even in the UK, in fact. So I've been told by people that are there that Aberdeen has fallen apart. Aberdeen has gone the same way as the rest of the country. People are asking questions about things like a Second Amendment. Eventually, a tipping point is reached, and things fall apart, and they fall apart so badly that there has to be some kind of reaction when people feel genuinely frightened, when people feel that they can't live their lives, when people feel that the government has completely lost control. And I'm told, of course I wasn't there, but I'm told that there was this feeling in England in the 70s and the late 60s that there was just a total loss of control, that you had a country that was being held to ransom by trade unions. You had a government that was certainly had Soviet sympathizers within it. You had Labour people like Harold Wilson or whatever traveling to the Soviet Union, which of course made people rather wary of what he was all about. It turns out that he probably wasn't a Soviet spy, but you had very high level Soviet spies, and you had just general chaos. And in the 70s, in particular, the Winter of Discontent, they talk about everybody's on strike, the rubbish isn't collected, it's a huge sanitary problem, there's rats in the street, the dead go unburied. It's total chaos, and for a people who are probably more tolerant of difficulty than we are now, because we're so unused to bad things happening. We're so unused to hardship. We haven't experienced. I mean, if you go back to the 70s, you've got a generation of people, elderly people back then, who were Victorians, who were born in the 1890s, and who probably would have had a sibling that had died as a child, or a child that had died of their own. These people were used to, and they'd been brought up in a much harsher, much more violent, kind of, and much more kind of, in some ways, unstable kind of society. And they thought they regarded the situation in the 70s as intolerable. And in some ways, that situation was, of course, worse than now. But in some ways, it was better in that you did not have to worry about domestic terrorism, about basically a constant low-level civil war led by vaguely organized lone wolves. You didn't have that. You had the IRA, but this was centrally organized, and therefore, in a sense, much easier to deal with, much easier to infiltrate, and therefore much easier to thwart. Whereas these are just random people that are vaguely interconnected, one assumes, via a shared ideology. And we have a government that, in Britain, you have a government, not me, that is essentially sympathetic to them, and will therefore do and relies on those perhaps who rather sympathize with them for votes. So it is unable and unwilling to uphold national security. And this will happen. This has happened. This will die down, and it will happen again. And it's a matter of sort of a death by 1,000 cuts. At what point? At what point is this too much for people? At what point will they have had enough? I don't know. Someone's mentioning the Nottingham murders. Yeah, exactly. Just random people, just two complete innocent people. Was it two or was it more? I think it was two. Or was it three? Just wiped out at random. And that could be any of us or at any time. And that's totally unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable that people should have to walk the streets thinking at any time this could happen. At high trust society, these are not considerations. They are not considerations, and they don't need to be considerations. And only if you move away from a high trust society do these become considerations, and they shouldn't be. And something needs to be done so that they are not considerations. So this can never, ever, ever happen, because everybody should feel that they are part of the same society and they have the same interests at heart, and they are, of it. And only if you move away from that does this kind of thing happen. Embrace our strategies, says Curmudgeonist. Yeah, well, that's what it puts you into, doesn't it? It puts you into an unstable ecology. Well, an unstable yet easy ecology. That's effectively what we're in. It's an easy ecology in the sense that nobody's starving. Everybody can get food. But it's unstable. And we know how that makes people, it's unpredictable. And we know how that makes people behave. So this is really, really quite damaging. So anyway, I just thought I would come on and have a bit. Has anyone heard? I don't know if there's been any news while I've been talking for the last half an hour. Let me just check. Well, to be fair, we can't trust anything the papers say, can we? So there's now some video that seems to have emerged, which presumably they've had for ages and only now putting out. Train master are British. Still the Telegraph. The Telegraph. The king is appalled and shocked. Oh well. Not thought to be terrorism. They're saying, but there's 2 people involved. Surely, if it's motivated by some kind of ideology, they say, yes, I see what you're saying, Bella Vida 7628. Not thought to be terrorism. What is it then? Well, it's just 2 people that thought they'd go and 2 people thought they'd get together and go and stab people, sort of folie à deux. I don't see what it can be other than terrorism. If there's any kind of political or religious or whatever motive, it is terrorism. Well, I'd be interested to see what they say it is then, and if it's not terrorism, what can it possibly be? I don't know. I don't know how they can say it's not terrorism. Let me just check if there's any other developments. 9 passengers stabbed, 2 men held on suspicion of attempted murder. I would have thought if it's 1 man, then that might imply just some kind of head case, some kind of nutter. But surely, if it's 2 people, that must be terrorism. I can't see. I mean, if there's any kind of motivation, any kind of political motivation, it must be terrorism. So there's just been a police statement. What does it say? Where are you getting this stuff from? This police statement? Because I'm just checking the papers and that I have here. Maybe I should update it, refresh it. Isn't that what they call it? 2 British nationals, 1 black and 1 of Caribbean descent, are held for attempted murder as 2 fight for life in hospital after train rampage. That's what I have in the mail, which is the. But let's see if there's anything. You're saying there's a police statement. Let's just have a look. The 2 suspects, a 32-year-old black British national and a 35-year-old British national of Caribbean descent. Officers have reported. Superintendent John Lovelace, speaking at the scene, it's shocking incident. First, almost thoughts and prayers, whatever. The knife rampage happened. 11 people stabbed, 4 in hospital, 2 remain in life-threatening condition, 4 have been discharged. I can see nothing. If that's the police statement, then it adds nothing. But yeah, here we go. Passenger Ollie Foster. It's particularly annoying, as I said, and that's part of the reason why I started this live stream, was because of their lies about him, or their failure to report what he obviously said. So yeah, it's right. There's no more information. Basically, it seems that 32 of UK born. Well, it's there's no more information. I don't see how it can be anything other than terrorism. But they will control this narrative. Obviously, chaps, better to check Twitter. Twitter more reliable these days. And Twitter more an earlier source of news than the newspapers. So I would check Twitter if I were you. Well, anyway, let's see how it develops. Well, anyway, thanks a lot. And if you're new, please say subscribe here on on YouTube, and subscribe on Jolly Heretic, which is my Substack, jollyheretic.com. And unless anybody in the chat has any further information, if they were a witness or know a witness or something like that, then no, it'll just be the very tiresome day of thoughts and prayers. We ask you not to speculate, and all of this. Thank you, Holger. We ask and all this nonsense as this low-level civil war continues to unfold, and people who are left-wing will be in denial about this. Elon Musk keeps saying, "Oh, the civil war is inevitable." This is what a civil war is like. This is what a certain kind of civil war, a low-level civil war, is like. It's like this. This is a civil. It's not like it's going to happen. I think this is basically it. This is it. It's happening. It's actually happening, Reg. Okay. Thanks a lot, chaps, and goodbye.